If you were to poll people on the street today, believers, skeptics, agnostics, and ask them what the single biggest stumbling block is when it comes to faith, I really think the vast majority would point to the exact same thing. It's the hell problem.
Well, absolutely. The hell problem. It's the elephant in the theological room for sure.
Right. It's this massive contradiction. Because if God is defined as love, capital L, and if he is truly this benevolent creator, why does a place of eternal torment even exist?
Yeah, it's a fair question.
Why would a loving creator demand worship and then punish someone forever just for saying no?
Yeah.
It feels, well, to a modern listener, it feels like a cosmic ultimatum, like love me or else. It feels incredibly coercive.
It does. It creates a really intense tension. You have this concept of infinite love just completely colliding with the concept of infinite judgment. And usually when we talk about this, people get really stuck on the force aspect.
Right.
The idea that God is this angry judge, just throwing people into a prison they didn't ask for because their theology wasn't quite right.
Exactly. But the source material we are covering for today's deep dive, it flips that narrative completely on its head.
It really does.
We are looking at a text that is, frankly, a little disorienting at first, because it connects the theological mechanics of eternity and hell directly to, of all things, marriage advice from the book of Proverbs.
I know, it sounds like a total category error, doesn't it? Jumping straight from the metaphysics of the afterlife right to the kitchen table.
It really does. But the mission for today is to unpack how the source argues these are actually the exact same problem. The core argument is that hell isn't about God's anger at all. It's about God's profound respect for human autonomy.
Yes.
And that same autonomy, that same free will, is exactly what makes a marriage work. So it's all about choices, boundaries, and, as the text puts it, where you choose to drink.
It's a really bold claim. So to really get into this, we have to look at the foundation the source lays down first. It starts with this concept of the owner. And they aren't speaking metaphorically here at all. They are being incredibly, almost aggressively literal.
They are. The text opens by establishing this baseline of reality. The claim is that God created literally everything. And they don't just mean, the mountains and the oceans and the trees.
Right, the nature stuff.
Yeah, they get very specific about modern, manufactured, everyday life.
They do. They specifically list your Starbucks drink, parties, TV, sports.
Which is such a deliberate rhetorical choice.
It forces you to realize the source is arguing that the raw materials and the capacity for enjoyment all originate from the creator. The caffeine in your cup, God's design, the electricity for the TV, God's physics, the dopamine hit you get when your team scores, God's biology. The premise is stark. You are his. This earth is his. Everything is his.
So if I'm drinking a latte, technically I'm sipping on God's property.
Precisely. And this sets up the central tension of the entire text.
Right.
You have a creator who claims complete, total ownership of the hardware of existence, including you, but who operates the software on a system of complete, total free will.
That's the exact phrase the source uses, complete, total free will. But, isn't that a paradox? If he owns me, and he owns the whole world I live in, how am I actually free?
That's where their specific definition of love comes in. The author states explicitly that God refuses to be intrusive. He will not blow past human decisions. He owns the house, right? But he lets you put a lock on your bedroom door. He's not going to force his way in.
Which brings us right back to that opening question. Because if he owns the place, and he loves us, and he respects our door locks, why the bad ending? Why the separation? Why doesn't he just fix it all at the end?
Well, the source reframes the narrative of hell entirely to answer that. People always ask, why would God send me to hell? But the text suggests God doesn't send people to hell in the way we think of a judge sentencing a criminal to a cell. Rather, he grants them their wish.
Their wish? Come on, that seems like a stretch. Who wishes for torment? No one is signing up for that.
No, of course not. But follow the logical progression the text provides. It defines the locations simply by presence. Heaven is defined as where God is. It is where his presence dwells. And since the source defines God as love itself, that place is where love dwells.
Okay, so heaven equals God's presence. That tracks with standard theology.
Correct. And conversely, the source defines the other place, hell, not initially by fire or brimstone or physical torment, but by its geography relative to God. It is simply a place that is not where he is.
So it's a void, an ontological vacuum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So here is the scenario the source lays out. God places you on earth with the option to acknowledge him. He asks for obedience to simple things. He wants a relationship. He wants you to be a child of God. But if a person looks at God and says no, God respects that.
He doesn't override the no.
He doesn't. The text says he's not going to impose. So if you spend your entire life saying, I don't want you, I don't want your rules, I don't want your presence, God looks at that choice and says, okay, thy will be done.
And since he is the literal source of love,
if you choose to be away from him, you are choosing to be away from love. The source argues that the punishment is actually just the fulfillment of the human desire to be separate from God. You don't want to go to his house. You don't have to. But you cannot have the benefits of his house-like love, comfort, and protection if you outright refuse to enter it.
that puts a completely different spin on it. It's not, I hate you, go away. It's, you wanted to be away, so here is a way. But here's where the source gets really dark. Because away isn't just an empty, quiet room.
Right, it's not solitary confinement. The source goes into detail about who else is in that away place. We could call it the demon dynamic.
It paints a genuinely chilling picture. It mentions that fallen angels, demons, also said no to God. They made the exact same choice humans did, so naturally they're in the exact same location, the place where God isn't.
But the source adds this layer of psychological horror to it. It reminds the listener that humans are made in the image and likeness of God.
Right, which is usually this very positive affirmation. We usually hear that in church and feel really good about ourselves.
Usually, yes. But in this context, think about it from the perspective of the source material. Demons hate God. They have rejected him completely. So if you are a human in that place, you are walking around wearing the face of their enemy.
Oh, wow. I hadn't connected those dots.
The source explicitly argues that these entities hate humans specifically because they bear God's image.
So on Earth, the source implies we have some sort of buffer, even if we ignore God.
Yeah.
Because right now, even people who completely hate God still experience good things. Beautiful sunsets, good food, love.
Yes. The text mentions God as a protector and the Holy Spirit as a comforter. Even if you ignore God on Earth, the source implies his general grace still offers a shield. It keeps the absolute worst of that spiritual reality at bay. But in the place of separation, that shield is down. You are left totally vulnerable to entities that hate you, in a place completely void of love.
And the source points out that the demons are the ones to blame for the misery there. It's not God torturing you. It's the company you deliberately chose to keep.
That is the argument. It's a complete absence of the comforter.
This leads to the source's incredibly urgent plea. It asks these rhetorical questions that just stop you in your tracks. It says, why would you live like hell here? Why would you live like hell for all eternity?
It's contrasting life versus eternity. The author is just baffled by the choice to reject God. They argue that God gave humans the opportunity to choose love right here, to feel what love actually feels like.
And there's a deadline. The source says you have up until your last breath.
That's the invitation aspect. It's not just a warning or a threat, it's a promise. The text says, if you give God a chance, you will fall so desperately and madly in love with him that the alternative just becomes unthinkable. It posits that the relationship is meant to be deeply, profoundly satisfying, not just a rigid set of rules.
And that word satisfying is the perfect bridge to the second half of this deep dive.
Yeah.
Because if we just stop here, it's just a heavy theological treatise on the afterlife. But the source doesn't stop at the macrocosmic choice of heaven versus hell. It pivots immediately to the microcosmic choice found in Proverbs chapter 5.
It pivots straight to marriage.
Which, again, feels like a hard left turn. But if you look closely at the text, the parallel is really striking. We move from spiritual faithfulness, choosing God over separation, to relational faithfulness, specifically choosing your spouse over everyone else.
The source uses Proverbs 5 verses 15 through 24 to make this point. It anchors on that famous verse, drink waters out of your own cistern and running waters out of thine own well.
Okay, let's decode this a bit. Cistern, that is not a word I use in daily life. If I invite my friends over for a drink, I don't say, hey, come look at my cistern.
No, probably not. But in the ancient Near East, a cistern was everything. It was a private, guarded reservoir for storing water, which was critical for survival in a desert climate. But the key here is the distinction between a cistern and a public well or a stream in the street.
Because a stream is open to everyone. Anyone can walk by and take a sip.
Exactly. A stream is public property. A cistern is private. It's enclosed. It's yours. The source interprets the cistern as a direct metaphor for your covenant, your marriage, and your God-given sexual relationship.
And the running waters.
That represents the intimacy, the satisfaction, and the life found within that specific, exclusive bond.
So the command to drink waters out of your own cistern isn't just about hydration. It's about exclusivity.
It means find your satisfaction exactly where you committed to find it. The source explicitly says God is telling you, don't go looking for emotional or sexual satisfaction outside what I have given you. Don't drink from the public stream.
Here's the key insight I pulled from the notes on this section, and I think this is where the modern mindset really struggles. Faithfulness is almost always viewed in our culture as a restriction. You know, the old ball and chain trope, I can only be with one person, how boring. But the source completely reframes faithfulness, not as restriction, but as protection.
That is a crucial distinction. In the exact same way that staying with God is a protection from the outer darkness and the demons we talked about earlier, staying within the covenant of marriage is a protection. It protects you from the chaos of what Proverbs calls the strange woman or the stranger. It's not about limiting your joy at all. It's about securing it.
Speaking of joy, the source really emphasizes that this isn't supposed to be a miserable, white-knuckled duty. It quotes the verse, "Rejoice with the wife of thy youth."
And it goes further. The source states marriage is not meant to become dull.
I love the language used here. The text says to rekindle affection and guard intimacy. And then it quotes Proverbs saying, "Be thou ravished always with her love." Ravished is a strong word. It's not a passive roommate-level word.
It is intense. It implies being overwhelmed, captivated, intoxicated even. The source is arguing that the ultimate antidote to wandering eyes is not just willpower or grit. The antidote is delight.
Right. Because if you are ravished by your spouse, you aren't looking elsewhere. You simply don't need to look elsewhere.
Exactly. The source notes that the enemy tempts with novelty. It's that shiny new object syndrome. But the text argues that true depth, the running waters, is found in the committed, long-term relationship, not the novel, fleeting one. You can't dig a deep, life-sustaining well if you just keep digging shallow holes all over the yard.
That's a fantastic way to put it. But we do have to talk about the trap. Because Proverbs 5 warns heavily against the strange woman, which is the biblical metaphor for the affair, the seduction, the thing outside the covenant.
This is the anatomy of the trap. The source breaks down the philosophy of temptation perfectly here. It says sin looks attractive, but it enslaves.
It's the ultimate bait and switch. It looks like freedom, but it actually feels like chains.
And the actual mechanics of that enslavement are described in verse 22. This is, in my opinion, one of the most profound points in the entire source material. The verse says, "His own iniquities shall take the wicked himself, and he shall be holden with the cords of his sins."
Holden with the cords of his sins. That sounds poetic, but what does it mean practically?
The source unpacks this brilliantly. It argues that sin does not need external chains. God doesn't need to come down from heaven and physically handcuff you. Sin becomes the chain.
That's a really sticky concept. Can you expand on that? How does the sin itself actually bind you?
Think about the mechanics of an affair, or honestly, even a simple lie. We often think of punishment as something God does to us from the outside, like throwing a lightning bolt. But this text suggests that the action itself wraps around you.
Like, if I tell a lie at work?
If you tell a lie, you now have to remember that lie. You have to actively maintain it. You have to hide the truth. You become trapped by the daily maintenance of your own deceit. If you pursue an affair, you become bound by the secrecy, the guilt, the constant duplicity, the fear of getting caught. You forge your own chains.
It's self-imprisonment. You think you're stepping into this grand freedom by breaking the rules and pursuing novelty, but you're actually just stepping into a cage you built with your own hands.
It is. And the source ties this right back to the omniscience of God. It quotes, "The ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he pondereth all his goings."
Which connects all the way back to the owner premise we started this whole deep dive with.
It does. God sees it all. He owns the Starbucks drink, and he sees you drinking the Starbucks drink. He sees the massive spiritual choices, accepting or rejecting him, and he sees the quiet, private, relational choices, fidelity or infidelity. You cannot compartmentalize your life from the one who created the life.
So let's try to bring these two halves of the deep dive together, because we have covered a lot of ground. We have the well of destiny guarding your soul for eternity, and the cistern of marriage guarding your heart on earth. What's the unified theory here?
The synthesis is really all about the binary choice. The source is very, very stark about this. It quotes, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Any other thing apart from this comes from the evil one."
It's a call against ambiguity. You can't be half in with God, and you can't be half faithful in a marriage.
Right. It references the idea that he that is not with me is against me and scatters abroad. The source presents reality as a series of distinct paths. There's the path of life, God, and covenant, And there's the path of death, separation, and strangers. There is no magical middle ground where you can have all the benefits of God without God, or all the benefits of a marriage without fidelity.
It really challenges the listener to stop drifting. I think a lot of us just drift through these major decisions. We tell ourselves, I'm not rejecting God, I'm just really busy right now. Or, I'm not cheating on my spouse, I'm just harmlessly flirting at the office. But the source says, no, guard the well.
Because guarding implies active vigilance, you have to actively choose to drink from your own cistern. You have to actively choose the God who created you every single day. Passivity, according to this text, naturally leads to the strange woman and ultimately leads to the place where God is not.
You know, before we wrap up, I'm stuck on one final thought that the source really drives home. And I want to put it out there for you, the listener, to mull over. It goes all the way back to that idea of absolute ownership we started with, the Starbucks, the sports, the TV.
The idea that he owns the literal hardware of the universe.
Yeah, it's a provocative, almost disturbing thought. If the source is right, and God literally owns everything, including the very energy currently firing in your neurons that allows you to make a decision,
then your actual ability to reject him is in itself a borrowed gift.
Exactly. The source implicitly asks us to consider, do you view your own free will as a borrowed tool? And according to this text, if you use that borrowed gift to walk away from the giver, isn't that the ultimate tragedy? You are using God's own power to reject God's presence.
And the source would add, why use that incredible power to choose a destination where the giver and all his love and protection will never follow?
That is definitely a lot to mull over. Whether you're thinking about the grand scale of eternity or just trying to keep your daily relationships on track, this text forcefully argues that your choices have weight.
Massive weight.
Thanks for diving in with us today.
Always a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.